On today's episode of TLC Hot Topics, we'll be speaking with a phenomenal leader in the banking sector, a Latino influencer, a strong supporter of the Latino Coalition, and a dear personal friend. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss this episode. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning into TLC Hot Topics. We are really excited to have you join us today. I'm your host, Danny Vargas, National Director at the Latino Coalition. In addition to these podcasts where you get to hear from inspiring guests, we also have a webinar series where you'll learn really great information on really important topics. And keep an eye out for our future events, including the Latina Prosperity Summit in Miami in October. That's going to be a must-attend event. We really want to thank our sponsor for these podcasts and webinars, Wells Fargo. And speaking of Wells Fargo, I am pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Ruben Barrales. Ruben, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Danny.
I'll read a brief intro for your impressive background. Ruben is Senior Vice President of External Engagement at Wells Fargo. He was previously the President and CEO of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce and of joint venture Silicon Valley Network. He served in the White House as Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of White House Intergovernmental Affairs. He's the son of Mexican immigrants, and he was the first Latino elected to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors in California. He was recognized as one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States by Hispanic Business Magazine, and he received the Otley Award from the government of Mexico for improving the well-being of Hispanics in the United States. Ruben, my friend, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. I'm exhausted from you just reading that. That's a lot. You forgot the part about the growing up in a log cabin, but that's okay.
And walking uphill to school and back both ways, right? It was uphill both ways.
Right.
But you know, it's really exciting for me to have you join us today, Ruben, because you've been such a dear friend and such a great inspiration to myself and so many of us. And your personal story is just one that it's not only inspirational, it's really motivational. So why don't you take a couple minutes to share with our listeners your personal journey?
Well, sure. Well, it's probably motivational because, you think if he can do it, anybody can do it. So I totally get that. And very, very true. But yeah, as you mentioned, Danny, I'm, the son of Mexican immigrants. So for me, that's really where it all begins with, my father and my mother. My father having been a bracero, in the bracero program where Mexican nationals came over and worked mainly in the fields. My father worked mainly on the railroads and just fell in love with this country and the opportunity that was here in the United States for someone who really had nothing, no real ability for economic or social mobility back in Mexico in those days. And so he went back and married a Mexico City girl, and they both then came up through Southern California to the Bay Area, California, where I grew up. That area now is known as Silicon Valley, but in those days, it was known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. It was orchards and canning factories. And so my dad was a manual laborer working in construction eventually. My mom worked in those canning factories. And then she was cleaning houses. And I remember growing up and being both very proud and very embarrassed by my mom, who was cleaning the homes of some of my, schoolmates. And they would tell me how their mom said, my mom was such a great house cleaner. And, as a small kid, that's, again, you're really proud that your parents work hard, but you're kind of embarrassed because, your family is really just serving those folks of your peers and the like. And my dad, who never had any kind of education beyond third grade back in Mexico, he ended up starting his own small business. He was a roofer, which was the most awful occupation for a young boy to have a father as a roofer. Because guess what I got to do during the summers and on the weekends was mopping hot tar and nailing shingles and all that fun stuff, which gave me a great work ethic and an appreciation for the need to do more. And so, and I did, and I'm really proud of the fact I went first in my family to go to college. And I came back, and I probably have the distinction still of, after going away to college, coming back, working with my dad, I was probably the best educated roofer on the San Francisco Peninsula for a while there. So, and you know, and I don't know if it's a Latino thing, but to me, there was nothing other than getting an education and then coming home and working with my parents. I mean, that was just, I just didn't really think about doing anything else. It was for me fantastic as a young person to be working physical labor, you know, running a small business. And then unfortunately, my dad had a terrible accident, and you know, that really changed things, I think, for me and my family. And I got much more involved ultimately in kind of what was happening in my community, and volunteering, and really looking for, you know, other ways to contribute in my community. And long story, well, short, but not really short, because I'm going very long still. But I ended up as a 29-year-old running for County Board of Supervisors in San Mateo County, if you're familiar with the Bay Area there. It was, you know, we worked really, really hard, and we won that election, ran against 2 former mayors in the area. We won the election, the final general election, with 50.1% of the vote. So that was basically it was 1 vote per precinct that made the difference in that election. You know, really, really proud of that victory. We obviously didn't waste a dime. We got just as many votes as we needed. But the one interesting thing is, when you go back and look at that, the area that I represented, heavily Latino and African American neighborhoods, voted for me kind of like 70% versus the other areas where I underperformed in kind of a more general population, which, you know, to me just speaks to the idea of, you know, being in the community and working with the community. I did a lot of volunteer work and all before and all that, and then a lot of the work that I focused on as a county supervisor was in those communities, high crime areas, and areas what, you know, didn't have great reputation for high quality education. And so we worked on those issues there, and then moved on to work in Silicon Valley at joint venture, did that. Again, there's a longer story to it, but I had an incredible opportunity to work at the White House for George W. Bush, to be his director of intergovernmental affairs, which, when I got the phone call, working in Silicon Valley at the time, I got the phone call from the deputy chief of staff. They had just moved into the White House. The Bush administration was just starting. Got a call. Of course, I didn't think it was a real call from the White House initially. And then basically the question was if I'd be, you know, interested in you know, coming and talking about running the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. And I had 2 responses. One was absolutely yes, and second was, what is intergovernmental affairs? Turned out to be really within my wheelhouse. And I was the White House liaison. I had a team that focused exclusively on state and local officials around the country, elected officials in the territories like Puerto Rico and others, Indian country, the tribal leaders and the like. And so I spent those years in the White House, mainly outside of the White House, traveling around the country, meeting some incredible leaders on both sides of the aisle, you know, who are focused on trying to get things done for their local communities. And then after that experience, went to San Diego, which, you know, every Californian, wherever you live, you want to live in San Diego at some point. So I ran the Chamber of Commerce there in San Diego, you know, focused on cross-border issues mainly, you know, trade and transportation issues between Tijuana and San Diego, making sure to, you know, work on helping to facilitate that cross-border experience in commerce. And then I ran a group focused on electing Latinos and Latinas to state and local offices, mainly in California. We helped to elect about 300 folks before I came to Wells Fargo, which is the role that I'm in right now, which to me is just an incredible honor to work at a company like Wells Fargo with the kind of resources that we have. And my focus is on working in diverse communities, helping to serve small business people, helping to increase Wells Fargo's reputation, but our work in those diverse communities across the country. And that's again why I love partnering with the Latino Coalition to help the work that you're doing with supporting Latino small business owners.
That's phenomenal. And every time I hear your story, I get so inspired. And
Again, yes.
yeah, it's true though. I mean, you've worked so hard, and you're out there in the community, not just representing Wells Fargo, but really representing yourself in such a dynamic and inspirational way. So thank you for everything that you've done, and thank you for being such a good friend over the years. Even your time in the White House, that was incredible. I still would love to learn more about how that even happened, how it was that they found you and picked up the phone and called you to come to DC. That was incredible. But I do want to take a moment to see if I can pick your brain on some of the policy matters that are really of interest to you and Wells Fargo. I'm sure that the banking sector is such an important part of our national economy. So there's got to be lots of things that you're really passionate about in terms of the banking sector.
Oh yeah, well, the banking sector is so important in our economy. I think most people recognize that, but one of the reasons we have such a strong economy in the United States, macro economy, obviously goes up and down, but we have an incredibly strong banking system. We have an incredibly strong regulatory system that oversees it. And it's gotten stronger. Obviously, there were issues in the mid 2008, 2009, obviously, but I think we've come out of that even stronger. Actually, was very proud of how Wells Fargo actually came into that situation, how it dealt with that situation as opposed to some others. But for me, the real focus is on how do you increase home ownership, and in this case, especially within the Latino community. Very proud that Wells Fargo is the #1 bank providing Latino families an opportunity to purchase homes. So, that's an incredible opportunity and responsibility. As interest rates go up, it becomes harder for folks to qualify, and trying to figure out how we can help as much as possible, both philanthropically, of course, but I think even more importantly is, how do we make it a day-to-day experience so that Latino families understand that they have an opportunity to really purchase, and be a part of the American dream through home ownership. So that is an incredibly important piece of what we do again as a bank, as a business, as a leading, and I mean Wells Fargo has had one of the largest foundations of corporate America, and leading with home ownership is one of our key pillars.
So that's an incredibly important way for families to be able to establish a foundation of ownership and something that they can leave to their children. There's a legacy and so forth. So that's really important. The other aspect,
it's a thing that my family never had, that many Latino families never experienced. Generational wealth. How do you accumulate it? How do you transfer it? And how do you then build a base upon which future generations can thrive? And that's really important. Home ownership is just a piece of it, Danny, as you know. I mean, that's a piece of it, but it's also how do you generate wealth? How do you manage your budget? How do you look long-term in terms of retirement and the like? And it's something that we definitely need to do a much better job, because the Latino community, as you know better than most, is a very young community, our average age and the like. And so we need to provide the tools and the understanding to young Latinas in terms of, you've got a job, how do you start planning now for retirement? Which, I don't care if you're Latino or otherwise, many young people don't really think about that or focus on that. But if we make that an important part of what we leave as a legacy, I think that'll help future generations in a big way.
I totally agree. And another important way to be able to create sort of that sustainable self-sufficiency in some cases is starting your own business, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure, I know Wells Fargo has a lot of resources and a lot of attention and focus being placed on small businesses. And I wanted you to share a little bit more about what you think about the whole small business aspect of
Well,
banking.
I'm a child of small business. So literally as I mentioned, my dad had a small roofing company. Our national headquarters was our kitchen table, and, our facilities, basically we ran out of our garage, all of our equipment and our one truck. So, I know small business. I know, staying up late at night, doing payroll, doing, filling out forms. That's where I got my appreciation for, if you ever got in the mail any envelope with a government seal on the outside of it, I knew there was no good news could come from that. Like a good, at best you're neutral, right? And so a healthy appreciation for regulation, if you will. And then my mom, I mentioned, house cleaner, worked in the factories, worked in retail, and eventually she opened up just 2 blocks away from our house, a little coffee shop in our neighborhood. So again, if I wasn't roofing on the weekends or summers, I got the pleasure of washing dishes at the restaurant. So I understand and appreciate what it takes to start and to run a small business. And number one, it's not for everyone. I mean, it is tough. It's in many ways, so many Latinos they have a small business, but what they're really doing is they're self-employed. They're really providing, income. They're not getting rich by any means. They're just providing income by doing a trade or a business that they're familiar with and they're doing. And what I love about, being a part of a company like Wells Fargo, we're focused on what can we do to help small businesses, Latina-owned businesses grow. So small business growth is actually one of our pillars in terms of our foundation, our philanthropic work, and it's a huge part of our business. We want to see our customers grow their business, and so we do that in a number of ways. The pandemic really hit Latino businesses hard. Many closed, many struggling to pay their bills and the like. Wells Fargo, I think a lot of people don't realize, a number of people were able to take advantage of the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, which helped a lot, thousands and thousands of businesses across the country. Glad that Wells Fargo was able to participate there. But our CEO, and we have a new CEO who's really changing things within Wells Fargo, Charlie Scharf. And one of his early decisions as the pandemic started, most people don't realize that this was a government program that the banks then implemented. And by participating, banks received a fee for the loans that they gave out. Well, Charlie Scharf, our CEO, said, we're not taking 1 penny of those fees. We're any fees that we get related to that program, where we're giving these loans that became grants to small businesses, we're going to develop a fund, and all the money in that fund is going to go to help small businesses, with a special emphasis on diverse, including Latino businesses across the country. And so it was over $400 million in the end, which we provided to CDFIs, which folks aren't familiar with CDFIs. They're really more organizations within neighborhoods that can provide microloans, smaller loans to businesses, which hopefully more businesses can take advantage of. Provided technical training to organizations like the Latino Coalition and to Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and other organizations that can help provide technical training to small businesses. And then we're taking the remainder of those funds now, and you'll be hearing, we'll have announcements in the near future, really focused on particular areas, particular markets, cities, where we're going to try to do a little bit longer term efforts with a focus on how do we help small businesses grow. And hopefully from that, we'll get examples, real life examples of initiatives that really work that we hopefully can expand upon in the future in terms of, how do you help small businesses with all the challenges they face in terms of the business itself, life, work balance, technical expertise, how can we best help these businesses grow?
That's phenomenal. I think, anything that we can do to be able to help these small businesses that are actually, they're family-owned operations is basically what they're on in most cases. And it's all about families and being able to help them, create something. You talked about generational wealth earlier. It's also something that they can hand out to their kids in many cases, right? So it's really impacting a lot of people. So you're doing great things there at Wells Fargo.
Oh, thanks. I hope so. I mean, that's what we're focused on. And you know, you mentioned the family owned. Again, I know that very well. A lot of those businesses don't transfer generation because, again, part of the technical training is making a plan so that when the principal, for whatever reason, moves on, you know, is the family in a position to keep the business going or not, or is there a position, or is there a way to sell the business, to leverage it? You know, to create, again, wealth for the family moving forward. So those are all questions that unfortunately many people don't ask until it's too late. Maybe sometimes they don't even ask. And they don't maybe realize the assets that they have in a small family business that's just, you know, getting by, but potentially, you know, has more potential. That's where one of the main lessons I think we learned from the pandemic and the PPP loan situation where some small businesses didn't get them is that a relationship with your banker is really important, or with your bank. And it can be Wells Fargo, it can be another bank, but it's really important to have, as a small business, to have some kind of relationship. It's not just kind of the branch or online banking, but a relationship with someone at the bank who, if they can't help you directly, can refer you to someone else. That makes a huge difference in times like a pandemic, or when you have an important transition for the business to get some advice in terms of banking services, financial services.
Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because you talked about the PPP program, and you know that's one of those examples where Congress and the executive branch, you know, were able to work together in a bipartisan way to make sure that we can get the help out to folks that needed it most. And I thought that was really important to find ways to have that kind of bipartisan cooperation. You saw that firsthand when you were at the White House. So I'd love to learn more about your experience of having to work with legislators, with other members of government at the federal level, at the state and local level. What could we be doing better? What went right? What are we doing wrong right now in terms of, you know, just the ability to manage a political process that seems broken, but hopefully for many of us, we are hoping that things will get better eventually.
Okay, so this is a little ironic, Danny, because of all the people asking that question, you, who helped to lead the unanimous vote for the Latino Museum at the Smithsonian, probably know more than I do in terms of how do you work across the aisle to get things done. And so I do, you know, congratulations to you on that effort. I am proud that Wells Fargo, you know, stepped up and is a founding corporate sponsor of the Latino Museum at the Smithsonian, and excited about the opening of the Molina Gallery that's happened, and the future museum that will, you know, tell the Latino story for generations to come. But you know, again, better than most people, that if you know you want to get things done in Washington, you've got to try to work across the aisle. You've got to, and by that meaning, you have to actually talk to people on the other side of the aisle. A lot of what happens, especially these days, is people, you know, on both sides, they play and they talk to their audience. But you know, you really need to focus on what's the objective here, and you have to get buy-in. You know, you have to explain why what you're pursuing. For example, increasing home ownership with the Latino community, supporting Latino small businesses, why that's both should be a Republican priority and a Democratic priority, right? And structure it in a way that hopefully generates you know, enthusiasm and support from both sides of the aisle. It's getting tougher to do in this current environment. But I think, again, as you demonstrated, it can be done on issues that could otherwise be very, very polarizing.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and thank you for mentioning the museum example, but it's always been one of those things where the main thing is keep the main thing the main thing. So there's lots of opportunities for lots of noise and distractions to get in the way. But if you are able to find willing partners to step up and focus on the areas of agreement as opposed to, you know, the fringe areas of disagreement, you know, we generally find that most of the stuff that we agree on is something that we can all share in the victory, right?
Right.
So it's a win-win-win.
I think so. I think that's important. Washington's an interesting place. But in the end, it's not about Washington. It's about, you know, America. It's about, you know, everywhere else outside of Washington getting things done.
That's exactly right. I wish we had a lot more time because I really want to get into some of your other experiences with the chamber, for example. I know that's something that we were, all of us that were fans of Ruben Barrales were excited to
Oh,
see when you did
very
that.
small.
That was fantastic. So that's I'm sure you had a wonderful experience doing that, and all of the other things that you've done, and you've become such a great public speaker as well.
I'm
Who
taking
knew that you
lessons
were a
on the
stand-up
Andy
comedian?
Vargas method of public speaking, so I'm still learning.
So it's great. Listen, I wanted to wrap things up with a couple of things. Number one, uh, your support for the Latino Coalition has been something that we greatly appreciate. And we wouldn't be able to do these podcasts or webinars without your support. So if you can share a couple of thoughts on the Latino Coalition and your experience with it over the years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's important to have a voice for Latino small business, and the Latino Coalition, especially the incredible team that's running it now, is really focused on raising the issue in Washington and around the country, and building partnerships and having events that bring the right people together on the topic. So, just love what the Latino Coalition has been doing, and look forward to participating in future events.
And last question, because I know you got to get back to work, right? You're doing such important
I'm
work. You,
banker's hours here. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
never stops.
Never stops. Have you got some words of wisdom, some pearls of insight that you can share with our listeners who want to do a little bit of the types of things that you've been able to do in your incredible career?
Oh my gosh, but yeah, do better, do more than me. But just start. And for me, it's always been just making the connections in terms of connecting people together where there's opportunity to help them achieve their goals. And just kind of throwing yourself in the mix is the thing. I know a lot of Latino business owners and Latinos in business, they're hustling all the time. But just keep hustling. The ones that really stand out are the ones that never give up. Just never give up, and keep expanding your network. So that's my advice. It's worth every penny people are paying for it to listen to right now.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Ruben, thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Wells Fargo for making these podcasts and webinars possible. And on behalf of the Latino Coalition, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the content. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with our friend Ruben. Please join us for future webinars and future podcasts. Please keep an eye out for information on the upcoming Latina Prosperity Summit in Miami. And thank you once again, Ruben, for being our special guest today. And thank you all for joining us and listening. And as always, be safe, aim high, and thrive. See you next time. Hasta pronto.
Thanks, Danny. Bye.